following are events from Reddit. Events so scary you wish they were only in your nightmares. Viewer discretion is advised. The neighbor that ruined my life.
This definitely qualifies as a creepy neighbor story, the neighbor that ruined my life. I don't know if I'm the most attractive guy on the planet, but I was able to marry one of the most beautiful women you would ever see. We had our first daughter together while we were still living in my apartment. During the time we were working to save up so that we could actually get a property of our own. It was a busy time. We had a new kid. Every weekend we were house shopping, working a lot of hours, but I truly enjoyed my life. I love my wife and I believe she loved me the same amount, but buying a house was not the same as what we thought it would be. We found this nice suburb and this little 2-bedroom property. It wasn't perfect, but it was damn near close, so we bought it. Within the first week of moving in, my wife came to me and said there was something off about her neighbor. At this time I was pretty convinced that she was just overreacting. Boy, was I wrong. Every time I saw my neighbor, he was either doing work in his backyard, fixing something on his truck, or moving things in and out of his house. An old man in his 50s, but I thought nothing of it. Over the next few weeks, as we continued to move our stuff in, my wife made it apparent that the old man would continually stare at her. Now, to the guys that are reading this who dated somebody who is really attractive, you know that man will always be there. It doesn't really mean anything. Doesn't make him a bad person. It's just part of what you have to expect if you're dating somebody or if you're with somebody who is incredibly attractive. So this is why I was thinking nothing of it. Truthfully, I was having trouble even catching him staring at her. Every time I was with her, he refused to look over. He didn't make eye contact. He didn't say anything. About 3 weeks after moving in, my wife came to me absolutely terrified. I could see on her face that something was wrong, and I had never seen her act that way before. She told me how the man came across his property, stepped onto ours just to be able to get a good angle to the window, and all he did was stare. I asked her how long he stared, and she said for almost 15 minutes. She didn't know if she should go talk to him. She didn't know if she should call me. She didn't know if she should go to police. She just knew she was incredibly uncomfortable, and with a young child it made things even worse. Again, as somebody with no proof and not sure if my wife is overreacting, I ended up setting up some cameras across the property. Want to see if she was overreacting and I could just calm her down, or if we actually had a problem on our hands. Now, I did the foolish thing and I bought an older set of cameras where you actually have to go back and check the footage from the day before. No fancy alerts on my phone if something went off, and no storage if somebody were to rip down the camera and take it. It only took a couple hours after setting the camera up for my wife to call me upset. I must admit, I didn't rush home. I thought she was overreacting until I checked the footage. The man had set up a ladder on his side of the fence so that he could look over the fence into her house, and he stood almost perfectly still for 15 minutes just peering into the window that was our living room. I didn't want my first set of words to this man to be an accusation, so over the next day I proceeded to try to make some small talk just to say hi to new neighbors, you know. The man was semi-receptive. I don't think he was open, but I don't think it was necessarily that rude either. Later that day I saw the man staring into the property on the cameras yet again. This is the second time within 24 hours that we've seen him do this. This had to stop. Luckily he was outside working on his truck at the time, so I walked over, and keep in mind I was trying to be really friendly in this moment. I said, "What a beautiful truck. Is a 1999 Ford?" He looked at me, looked back at his truck, put his head back into doing the work and said yes. I said it was a gorgeous truck and that hopefully he has a fun time working on it. But I got to ask you something. Man, my wife has been a little creeped out lately. You know, she thought you were staring in the property. I'm not even sure if that's true. Before things get too crazy or too many problems, I just want to come and talk to you about it first. You know, man to man. He looked up at me, looked over at my house, looked over back at me down to his truck, and then asked what type of staring have I been doing. I'll be honest with you guys, I had no clue what to even say back to that. Again, I want to be friendly, so I just said, "Hey man, I'm not even sure. I just know my wife was a little nervous about a few things. I just want to make sure that everything is good, and we look out for one another. You know?" He said, "Duly noted," and he just continued to work on his truck. I said, "All right, have a good day," and I walked away. The man didn't respond. A couple days went by, and I hadn't heard anything. My wife isn't complaining, and I hope that the conversation kind of ended everything well. My wife went about her day-to-day things, taking care of a child, do some grocery shopping and your basic things. It's worth mentioning that my work is about an hour away, so when my wife is home, she's home all alone, and it can definitely add some of the stress. One day she got home from grocery shopping and she's taking the bags into the house to put them on the kitchen floor so she could put the groceries away. She made 2 trips into the house, and on our second time she noticed something out of the corner of her eye. Something that absolutely terrified her. The man was not only in our backyard, he was inches away from the back door, just staring into the kitchen. She let out a scream, ran to the phone, called the cops, and then instantly called me. By the time I got home, the cops were already there. I could see a couple different cop cars, one in front of his house, and one in front of ours. I rushed in and my wife gave me a giant hug with tears in her eyes. The cops instantly filled me in on the report that was being filed. But I said them, this is good news, guys. You know, we got camera footage and I have cameras set up all over my property, so I know that we would have caught him on camera. As I went with the cops to check out the camera footage, I was not prepared for one of the most unsettling moments was finding out that the cameras had all been taken down. How did it happen? The footage was gone and there was no proof that the man was actually standing in our backyard other than my wife and her concerns. Instantly felt sick to my stomach. What the hell is going on here? The cop said there was nothing we could do, as we have no proof, other than to file the report, both for the main trespassing and for the broken cameras. I could see the cops talking to the man in the front yard, and this is when I lost it. I stormed over there, walking straight to him, yelling at the top of my lungs, "You leave my wife alone, you hear me? If I ever see you on my property, I promise it will be the last time you ever step foot on this property." I shouldn't have done this, but that promise was one I was willing to keep. 48 hours have passed and we got a knock on the door from the cops. They asked if I was home when I came to speak with them. They asked me what I was doing last night at 1 in the morning. I told him I was in bed with my wife. What was this about? The cop said, "You're gonna have to come with us," and they took me down to the station. I sat there with some investigators questioning me about where I've been at certain times a day, what I've been working on. All this was confusing and I was not understanding for a second what this was about. Finally, they slammed the picture down on the table. And it was a dead body of the creepy neighbor. Mistake number 1 was threatening him in front of the cops 2 days before he would be found dead. Mistake number 2 was having a sense of relief and smiling at the dead body. If you ever want to look guilty, that's the way to do it.
Is he the murderer?
I don't know if I was ever the smartest, most gifted, but I worked hard. I actually had the same house that I grew up in. When my parents passed away, I inherited the house as the only child. It was run down. I needed repairs. I don't have the money to repair it, but it was home. My neighbors were far enough away, but you couldn't see them or their property. I knew who they were, they knew me, and that was about it. Like I said, I worked hard. I'm a man who works with my hands, fixing appliances, tools, pretty much anything that needed fixing. The challenge I had was money. I didn't have any of it. The work that needed to get done around the house, from fixing windows, fixing baseboards, I needed money to be able to buy the supplies to be able to get it fixed. It was becoming summer, and I got hot. Like anybody that knows, when you're working with your hands, you need to stay hydrated. My drink of choice, Budweiser. Occasionally I will buy a can of Coke or maybe some Mountain Dew. It being so damn hot, I went to the fridge for a drink and all my drinks were gone. In my mind, I was drunk. Likely drank all of myself and forgot about it. Pissed off with me, I made a note to go to the store and buy some more. Next day went to the store and bought 24-pack of Bud, a 2-liter bottle of Coke, and headed home. Next day same thing happened. Went to the damn fridge for an ice cold drink. No drinks. Pissing me right off. If you ever want to drink and there isn't one, do you know what that feels like? This happened a few times. It wasn't till the lady at the liquor store commented I was coming in a lot, more than normal. I told her maybe I was just drinking a lot. She said, "You don't remember any of it?" I said, "No, ma'am." She was the one that told me to set up some cameras in my house to see if there are some animals or some people playing with me. I told her I rightly couldn't afford that. Sure enough, a couple days go by and I was right back at the store. On my way out of the liquor store, the lady caught me and said, "Hey, wait for a second." She had a security system in her hands. Said it was her boyfriend, they weren't using it, but it was worth setting up. I said to myself, great, I'm gonna see myself drinking some Bud. Went home and damn near spent a couple hours trying to figure out how to set up this technology. Finally got it going and I forgot all about it. Seriously forgot all about it. Not a day goes by and I go back to the liquor store and she asked me if I'd checked the footage, to which I had not. When I got home I put the beer in the fridge. I went to check the footage. I'll never forget seeing my neighbors creak through my window, go on my fridge and take my fucking drinks. If you ever felt a hellfire, that's what I was feeling. I had two options. Option number 1, do the good civilian thing, call the cops. Option number 2, settle it, just like my dad had taught me. I can't say much more. Like I said, I'm not the brightest person, but I work hard. All I can say is, no one breaks into my place anymore.
Jealous neighbor.
Single mom here. I was divorced maybe a year before this happened. For my ladies out there, you know you go most your life thinking about getting married. When it happens you become blind to everything else going on around you. I was so happy, and he was affectionate, but I should have known he was cheating on me. Once I found out, that was the end of our relationship. Fortunately for me, the SOB had to give me half of what he's worth. This allowed me to buy a new place, buy a new car paid off, get my feet off the ground. I have some money in my bank account. In a strange way, I started feeling like it was a fair trade. Don't get me wrong, I'm still heartbroken and having to deal with a lot of emotions, but the lawyers did some great work for me. My ex was a big part of the community, so when rumors got out, there was enough people in the city who knew what was going on, but I didn't really have to explain. In fact, when I moved into my new place, most of the people around me were great, offering to help me get going, offering to have their lawn care people take care of my lawn. I really felt welcome. At first, my neighbor to the right was one of the kindest, gentlest men I've ever met. The short, bald, overweight man had a very gentle face, kind smile and a warm heart. Felt that all would change. He would often come over if I need things fixed. If there are things I just simply couldn't move, boxes that were too heavy, he was over in a heartbeat to help. He really was one of the guys that made me feel welcomed. But like I said, there's a lot of people on the street and made it very easy on me. One of them was a hunky single father across the street. Ladies, this man was gorgeous. Imagine a 6'4" blonde hair, blue-eyed gentleman. He was the type to rock your sheets and still be proud to bring home to mama. So needless to say, him and I got very close. I was so infatuated with this man that I couldn't see my neighbor increasingly getting more and more jealous. He would come over to fix things as well, and it's just nice to see him work. I remember one time he was over and he was helping me move my couch into a better position in the living room, and I looked in the window and I could see my neighbor directly staring in at both of us, looking enraged, confused, even a little hurt. Thinking nothing of it, I started developing real feelings for this guy. He was your kind of cliché handsome man, with a good personality, fun to be around, and a freak in the sheets. One day I got home and my neighbor instantly came over and said, "Can I help you with your bags?" And I said, "No, it's fine, I only got a couple, I can take them." And he insisted to grab my bags and we walked in the house together. Before we could even set the bags down, he asked me what I was doing with Scott, the good-looking man across the street. I said, "Oh, nothing. He's just helping me get settled." My neighbor replied, "Well, I'm helping you get settled. What do you need him for?" This was the first time I was deadly confused. I said, "You can help me too. Lord knows I need both of you." He forced a quick little smile on his face and then went back to being serious. "Households are meant to only have one man. You don't need him." This conversation made me very uneasy. It was actually the reason why over the next few weeks I intentionally tried to push him away. Either wanted to make sure Scott was over because he never seemed to want to talk if Scott was here, or just make it clear that I had other plans and wasn't able to spend time with him. I think this led him to believe he was losing me. I wasn't his to lose in the first place, but he got jealous and he got defensive. One day when I was driving home, I could see Scott yelling real loud at him. Scott looked so angry, I never seen him that way. It was kind of a turn on. At night when Scott came over, I asked him what that was about. He said, "Oh, nothing, forget it." I told him I couldn't forget it, because of how hard it was to see him like that. And yes, ladies, I got sidetracked and forgot to really get the answer on what that was about. The next few days went by fairly uneventful. I could see my neighbor got in and out of the house with a big tin bucket, and this time I thought nothing of it. He would occasionally look over at me but quickly break eye contact. Even though these little moments were stressful, they weren't any different than anywhere else I'd be living, or so I thought. That night, Scott came over with a very serious look on his face and said, "We need to talk." He wasn't sure what was going on. All the news he's getting the letter day in and day out. Letters that basically told him he needed to leave me alone, or both him and his daughter were in jeopardy. Originally, I thought it was something to do with my ex, even though he is a wealthy and respected man in the community. He knew some shady guys, and I wasn't sure yet if this was his way of getting back at me. I told Scott we need to go to the police. The police were going to solve this for sure, and there was no reason to ruin what we had going. But he said he had too, and I asked him why he wouldn't tell me. I asked him again and he wouldn't tell me. I said there has to be some reason why you're just willing to give this up so quickly. He said there is. He said he hadn't always been clean cut, and he had a horrible past. He done some things that he wasn't proud about, and somehow this person knew those horrible things, because his daughter was at jeopardy. He said the thing he had to do at the moment was end it between us. I was heartbroken. I could see him walk across the street with his head down, scratching the back of his head. My heart broke for him too. Right as he was walking across the street, my neighbor shows up driving in, likely coming home from work. Jumped out of his car, looked at Scott, looked at my place and back at Scott as he walked into his house. It had been about a day or so and Scott's daughter came across the street asking if I saw her dad. I hadn't, so we called the police to file a missing persons. We both assumed he was going to show up within a couple hours and it wasn't really a big deal. I told the cops that she could stay with me as long as she wanted, and I had no problem taking care of her, but she ended up staying with her mom. After her mom came and picked her up, couple days went by and I remember smelling the smell, unlike anything I've ever smelled. It was horrible. It was like rotting foods mixed with bad eggs and poop. I couldn't tell where it was coming from, and I saw my neighbor the next day to ask him if he knew what that smell was. With a big smile on his face, he said, "Don't worry, it'll be gone soon." He told me to have a great day and that we will talk soon. He did this all with a big smile on his face. He was right. The smell went away 3 or 4 days after that, and I never heard from Scott again. It's always sat with me. Did the little girl get her daddy back? What was it about his past that he didn't want anyone to know? And for those who are wondering, with Scott not being around, I did have my neighbor come back a few times. We watched some movies and hung out. He seemed like a kind-hearted gentleman that he was again.